Thank you for joining me again for another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric. Today's pithy patchwork project is one I've been looking forward to bringing to you. So often when we look at a quilt, we get confused and we say, oh, I don't know how I'm supposed to sew that together. It looks complicated. Simple construction can look complicated just in how we butt together the components that we're using. So in this quilt, unlike the quilt tops that I've shown before, where in the past I've highlighted each patchwork block by putting sashing around them so that you can continue to see the block in the whole quilt layout. In this case, I will be using Trip Around the Block and Bright Hope's Twist and butting them up against each other to create an overall patchwork design. This simple construction will hopefully help demystify what looks like a complicated pattern but really is just simply two patchwork blocks combined in one quilt top. While I have designed it for a baby quilt, you can add as many of these together as you need to get the width and the length of whatever patchwork quilt you want to make. With these steps, with this concept of putting components together, side by side, I hope you will feel confident to try designing your own quilt layouts to see what you get. With this basic demystifying top, you will have the skills needed to become a quilt designer, not just a quilt maker. So I hope that you will enjoy this quick video tutorial of me sewing the blocks together, and I'll come back and we'll speak again for a few moments at the end as I reveal the finished quilt top. Enjoy, and we'll see you again in a few moments. as you can see, it's now sewn together and I have a quilt top. I will make sure to place a picture here so that you can see it without it covering my face and causing me to stand way back from the microphone. I hope that this project has been one to inspire you to combine the different quilt blocks you're learning how to make. Something that I really recommend that you remember is to be kind to yourself. You will find that even if all the blocks are supposed to be 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches, sometimes we don't quite get that exact. When you use sashing, that can help put the blocks together and take your eye away from some of the measurement inconsistencies that you might have. When you place blocks up against each other, it's a little harder to hide the difference between a 12.5 inch unfinished block and, say, a 12.25 unfinished block. You can fudge, you can pull a little, gather a little, but most importantly, just remember, perfection does not come as we learn a skill. Perfect points come as we keep practicing the skill that we're learning. And the truth is whether it's our first quilt or our 50th quilt, there will be imperfections. We just get better at hiding them, at having them minimal. So, my stomach is growling, and I think I need to wrap this up. But there were a couple things that you may have seen in the video I just want to highlight. The first is that I will use pins to tell me what side I'm sewing together. So, go over that. When I take a block and lay it on top of another block, it's very easy when I pick it up to forget which side I'm supposed to sew. So if you've laid your quilt out on the floor or on a table, or even next to the sewing machine, put a pin to mark the side the seam goes on. I can't tell you the number of times we flip a block over, turn it upside down, rotate it, simply because it's a square object that we're sewing along one side, and not having a way to mark the side can get us into trouble. So throw a pin in it. The second thing I want to make sure to point out is do not cut your borders until you have measured your quilt top. Your seam allowance is different from my seam allowance. My seam allowance is different depending on the sewing machine that I'm using. So I always measure my quilt top, middle, and bottom, figure out the distance, figure out the length, and that average between those three measurements is what I use to cut my borders. It's just an extra little precaution to make sure my borders will lie flat. So, those are the two things I want to highlight in addition to that all-important rule: be kind to yourself. Making a piece of love. Making a hug. That's what we're doing here. And it doesn't do us any good to be making a hug for someone else if we're not being kind to ourselves. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little pithy patchwork project. And I hope that you come back and watch other of my videos in the future. But most especially, I hope you have a joy-filled day and that you will find peace and calm as you sit at your sewing machine rather than angst. Have a blessed day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Oh, I forgot to mention, don't forget to check in the description box below for a link to the free PDF pattern for these pithy patchwork projects. I hope you've enjoyed another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric, and we will see you again soon. Take care.